Good morning, everybody. Patty here from California. This article is from the Rutherford Institution. Commentary by John W. Whitehead. The Illusion of Freedom. The police state is alive and well. What happened here was the gradual habituation of the people, little by little, to being governed by surprise, to receiving decisions deliberated in secret, to believing that the situation was so complicated that the government had to act on information which the people could not understand, or so dangerous that even if the people could understand it, it could not be released because of national security. This separation of government from people, this widening of the gap, took place so gradually and so insensibly, each step disguised, perhaps not even intentionally, as a temporary emergency measure, or associated with true patriotic allegiance, or with real social purposes. And all the crises and reforms, real reforms too, so occupied the people that they did not see the slow motion underneath of the whole process of government growing remoter and remoter. Historian Milton Mayer. Brace yourself. There is something being concocted in the dens of power, far beyond the public eye, and it doesn't bode well for the future of this country. Anytime you have an entire nation so mesmerized by the antics of the political ruling class that they are oblivious to all else, you'd better beware. Anytime you have a government that operates in the shadows, speaks in a language of force, and rules by fiat, you'd better beware. And anytime you have a government so far removed from its people as to ensure that they are never seen, heard, or heeded by those elected to represent them, you'd better beware. The world has been down this road before. As historian Milton Mayer recounts in his seminal book on Hitler's rise to power, They Thought They Were Free, most of us did not want to think about the fundamental things, and never had. There was no need to. Nazism gave us some dreadful fundamental things to think about. We were decent people, and kept us so busy with continuous changes and crises, and so fascinated, yes, fascinated, by the machinations of the national enemies, without and within, that we had no time to think about these dreadful things that were growing, little by little, all around us. We are at our most vulnerable right now. The gravest threat facing us as a nation is not extremism, delivered by way of sovereign citizens or radicalized Muslims, but despotism, exercised by a ruling class whose allegiance is to power and money. Nero fiddled while Rome burned. America is burning, and all most Americans can do is switch the channel, tune out what they don't want to hear, and tune into their own personal echo chambers. We're in a national state of denial. Yet no amount of escapism can shield us from the harsh reality that the danger in our midst is posed by an entrenched government bureaucracy that has no regard for the Constitution, Congress, the courts, or the citizenry. If the team colors have changed from blue to red, that's just cosmetic. The playbook remains the same. The leopard has not changed its spots. Scrape off the surface layers and you will find that the American police state is alive and well and continuing to wreak havoc on the rights of the American people. We the people are no longer living the American dream. We are living the American lie. Indeed, Americans have been lied to so sincerely, so incessantly, and for so long by politicians of all stripes who lie compulsively and without any seeming remorse, that they've almost come to prefer the lies trotted out by those government over less palatable truths. The American people have become compulsive believers. As Nick Cohen writes for The Guardian, compulsive liars shouldn't frighten you. They can harm no one, if no one listens to them. Compulsive believers, on the other hand, they should terrify you. Believers are the liars' enablers. Their votes give the demagogue his power. Their trust turns the charlatan into the president. Their credulity ensures that the propaganda of half-calculating and half-mad fanatics has the power to change the world. While telling the truth in a time of universal deceit is, as George Orwell concluded, a revolutionary act. Believing the truth and being able to distinguish the truth from a lie is also a revolutionary act. Here's a truth few Americans want to acknowledge. Nothing has changed, at least not for the better, since Barack Obama passed the reins of the police state to Donald Trump. The police state is still winning. We the people are still losing. In fact, the American police state has continued to advance at the same costly, intrusive, privacy-sapping, Constitution-defying, relentless pace under President Trump as it did under President Obama. And I'll just scroll through these real quick. Police haven't stopped disregarding the rights of the citizens. SWAT teams haven't stopped crashing through doors and terrorizing families. The Pentagon and the Department of Homeland Security haven't stopped militarizing and federalizing local police. Schools haven't stopped treating young people like hardcore prisoners. For-profit private prisons haven't stopped locking up Americans and immigrants alike at taxpayer expense. Censorship hasn't stopped. The courts haven't stopped marching in lockstep with the police state. Government bureaucrats haven't stopped turning American citizens into criminals. The surveillance state hasn't stopped spying on Americans' communications, transactions, or movements. The TSA hasn't stopped groping or ogling travelers. Congress hasn't stopped enacting draconian laws such as the USA Patriot Act and the NDAA. The Department of Homeland Security hasn't stopped being a wasteful, growing, fear-mongering beast. The military-industrial complex hasn't stopped, profiting from endless wars abroad. The deep state's shadow government hasn't stopped, calling the shots behind the scenes. And the American people haven't stopped acting like gullible sheep. In fact, many Americans have been so carried away by their blind rank-and-file partisan devotion to their respective political gods that they have lost sight of the thing that has remained constant in recent years. Our freedoms are steadily declining. Here's the problem as I see it. We the people have become so trusting, so gullible, so easily distracted, so out of touch, and so sure that our government will always do the right thing by us, that we have ignored the warning signs all around us. In doing so, we have failed to recognize such warning signs as potential red flags to use as opportunities to ask questions, demand answers, and hold our government officials accountable to respecting our rights and abiding by the rule of law. Unfortunately, once a free people allows the government to make inroads into their freedoms, or uses those same freedoms as bargaining chips for security, it quickly becomes a slippery slope to outright tyranny, and it doesn't really matter whether it's a Democrat or a Republican at the helm, because the bureaucratic mindset on both sides of the aisle now seem to embody the same philosophy of authoritarian government. As I make clear in my book, Battlefield America, The War on American People, this is what happens when you ignore the warning signs. This is what happens when you fail to take alarm at the first experiment on your liberties. This is what happens when you fail to challenge injustice and government overreach until prison doors clang shut behind you. The American police state now surrounds us. There are no longer such things as innocence, due process, or justice, at least not in the way we once knew them. We are all potentially guilty, all potential criminals, all suspects waiting to be accused of a crime. So you can try to persuade yourself that you are free, that you still live in a country that values freedom, and that it's not too late to make America great again. But to anyone who has been paying attention to America's decline over the past 50 years, it will be just another lie. The German people choose to ignore the truth and believe the lie. Okay. They were not oblivious to the horrors taking place around them. As historian Robert Galately points out, anyone in Nazi Germany who wanted to find out about the Gestapo, the concentration camps, and the campaigns of discrimination and persecutions need only read the newspapers. The warning signs were definitely there, blinking incessantly like large neon signs. Still, Galately writes, the vast majority voted in favor of Nazism, and in spite of what they could read in the press and hear by word of mouth about the secret police, the concentration camps, official anti-Semitism, and so on, there's no getting away from the fact that at the moment, the vast majority of the German people backed him. Half a century later, the wife of a prominent German historian, neither of whom were members of the Nazi Party, opined, on the whole, everyone felt well, and there were certainly 80% who lived productively and positively throughout the time. We also had good years. We had wonderful years. In other words, as long as their creature comforts remained undiminished, as long as their bank accounts remained flush, as long as they weren't being discriminated against, persecuted, starved, beaten, shot, stripped, jailed, and turned into slave labor, life was good. This is how tyranny rises and freedom falls. As Primo Levi, a Holocaust survivor, observed, monsters exist, but they are too few in number to be truly dangerous. More dangerous are the common men, the functionaries ready to believe and act without question. Freedom demands responsibility. Freedom demands that people stop sleepwalking through life, stop cocooning themselves in political fantasies, and stop distracting themselves with escapism entertainment. Freedom demands that we stop thinking as Democrats and Republicans and start thinking like human beings, or at the very least, Americans. Freedoms demand that we do not remain silent in the face of evil or wrongdoing, but actively stand against injustice. Freedom demands that we treat others as we would treat them. And I'm running out of time, so you've got the gist. Thank you for watching. Until next time, have a wonderful day. I will post a link